Joining us on the line now to talk more about this is Dr. Walid Phares. Was that helpful yesterday? It almost, from my perspective, came across, Dr. Phares, as if the president was doing a little trash talking on the basketball court or something.
Well, the president, probably advised by his close advisors, was trying to limit the perception that Russia is really a problem now worldwide. That's why he called it regional power. In fact, Russia has God knows how many time zones. It's a Pacific power. It's a European power. It has allies in the Middle East, in Syria and Iran, both problematic for us. Russia has allies in this hemisphere, in Venezuela. And above all, gentlemen, Russia has still nuclear missiles, even more than us. So it is not really a regional power, it's a world power, and we do have a significant problem with them in Ukraine and in Crimea.
They have an alley 90 miles off our Florida coast.
Well, but you just make the point that it's not a regional power, so why does the president do that?
Because there's a lot of pressure on him to confront the Russian moves. I mean, when he was dealing with Syria, it was Russia that blocked the U.S. and the Security Council. Same thing in Iran. But now it's about NATO. It's about a country that could have been in NATO, and it's about countries, the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, that are in NATO. So there is a lot of pressure on the president to actually take serious action with regard to the crisis there, and he is not in that mood. He's not in the mood in stopping the Russian influence or what's happening in the region, Syria and Iran, but domestic affairs. So he's trying to minimize it. By the way, he said that now the real threat is a nuclear bomb in Manhattan, where I am right now. Well, when we had a debate in 2012, he said Al-Qaeda is on the run, Al-Qaeda is being defeated, we are much better now than before, and now to dodge the threat of the Russian expansion in Ukraine, he's back to Al-Qaeda.
Yeah. And by the way, let's talk about the terrorist threat and specifically the Middle East, Dr. Phares, because you have a brand new book. It's called The Lost Spring. And by the way, tomorrow night at Politics and Prose, Dr. Phares will be there at 7 p.m. for a book signing if you want to meet him. I might even swing by over there. It's sort of in the neighborhood. But you talk about the Lost Spring, of course, meaning the Arab Spring and our failed policy in the Middle East. This president came in with, promising so much change in our policy toward the Middle East. And he said, our problem is they don't like us on the Arab street. We're going to be popular. And the polls show now that we're less popular than we were when George Bush was president. And you argue in your book that we have been way too hesitant to actually try to assert our interests in that region. What should we be doing?
Well, actually, when the president went to Cairo to deliver his speech, he wanted to do a change. But we didn't understand what that change was until the Arab Spring came. And there was a race in this Arab Spring, as everybody knows. In the early wave, you had youth, you had students, you had women, you had minorities, a thin crust of the first wave. But the president shows that this administration will become a partner with the Muslim Brotherhood, with Nahda. These were not the forces that we wanted to ally with, and the Egyptians were the first ones to rise against that. They're not very happy with our foreign policy. The Tunisians as well. There is chaos in Libya. And in Syria, I argue in the book, we had a moment between March 2011 and the end of that year where we were still in Iraq. Iran was not yet in Syria. Hezbollah was not yet in Syria. Al-Qaeda was not yet in Syria. We did not do much. So in my book, I make the case that we missed a lot of opportunities. It's a huge wave. And one more thing, in 2009, when the Iranian people rose against the Ayatollahs, we did not stand by them. So we need to learn a lot from the failures of the last few years.
Well, given that, just really quickly, Hillary Clinton, who wants to be, she's our inevitable next president, she's pointing to the Arab Spring as one of her achievements as Secretary of State.
If the Arab Spring is the one led by the Muslim Brotherhood, then yes, it is an achievement. But the Arab Spring is not about that. The Arab Spring should have been a rise of civil society. We abandoned civil society in Iran, in the Arab world. We really need to correct our policy. And if she wants to become a real candidate for presidency, she should be critical of the past 5 years, not praising what happened.
But talk about the Arab Spring, talk about Benghazi, talk about what has happened recently with this Russian adventurism, and many people, including Mitt Romney in the last day, have said, look, this all falls at the feet of the former Secretary of State. The chickens, as they say in my part of the country, are coming home to roost over all the bad policies or the lack of policy that Hillary Clinton had when she was Secretary of State.
Well, you have to listen to Americans, but you have to listen also to the recipient of our policy in the region. Ask a majority of Egyptians, not very happy with our foreign policy with regard to Egypt. I mean, we sided with the regime that wanted to transform Egypt almost into a Taliban state. They're very frustrated with that. Ask the Lebanese, we abandoned Lebanon to Hezbollah. Ask the Syrians, we abandoned the moderates to both Assad, whom Secretary Clinton at the time called a reformer, and or to Al-Qaeda. So there is a whole wave in the region that is very frustrated with our policy. I don't think they're going to give her at least to claim that credit in the region.
30,000 Russian troops massed at the border. What are they up to in your mind?
Crimea is now under Russia. This is Crimea and Sebastopol are to Russia what Norfolk and San Diego are to us. That's how they see it. This is their fleet, and they're not going to let go of that. So all the sanctions we're putting are not going to make Russia withdraw from Crimea. The concern now is eastern Ukraine, 5 provinces in eastern Ukraine. What the Russians are doing, what Mr. Putin is doing, is massing those troops so that he will have a moral, psychological support to what I believe we're going to see in the next weeks or months, the rise of autonomous regions inside eastern Ukraine to form a sort of a country or a zone that would be close to the Russia. I don't think he's going to be using directly his forces unless NATO would move forward, and I don't think President Obama is in the business of having NATO move forward at this point in time.
Well, Dr. Walid Phares, we appreciate your perspective and appreciate you joining us here this morning.
Yes, and don't forget his book, The Lost Spring, available now. You can go meet him and get a book signed tomorrow night, 7 p.m., Politics and Prose. Thank you, Dr. Phares.
Thank you so much for having me.